Hello, I'm Robert Nelson, and welcome to these speculations about feedback in the context of online learning and teaching. So, feedback to me is quite a defining element of what we do online. Because if certainly if online were nothing but posting resources and putting up tests and the like, we would have very, very slim pickings. And what really makes it in any way analogous to on-campus teaching is that it has this element of feedback. Otherwise, all that we're doing is publishing. And so it seems to me it's uh, a very critical item in our list of things to get right. So among the many thoughts that I've had on this, of course, greatly assisted by what literature is now burgeoning around the theme of feedback, among which, of course, luminaries from Monash. But really the location, where you're going to do it, concerns me as much as anything else. Because the two things that stand out, the two locations, as it were, are quite fraught. One, of course, being assessment, and the other, the forums. So start with the forums and just consider that. Typically, we give feedback in online classes. In a tutorial, this happens all the time because students are saying things and we're saying things back. So that their thoughts are, in a sense, in a cycle. They're expecting that, and it's very engaging. It's a lot harder to do online because you've got to control a great deal of, either a great deal of activity or a dearth of it, and they're both problematic. And also, it's very hard to be tactful when certain students can't self-censor. In fact, you often find that it's quite an exhausting effort, quite an exhausting task to perform. And the more obvious case is assessment, where I think really online presents strong analogies to what we do in on campus, and sadly, they're often the things that we get wrong on campus, and we replicate them online. And so you'll probably, if you're as old as I am, remember the box of essays that just sits never collected by the bulk of students, and they contain not just the mark which the students get via another report, but all these copious comments that you've made, and that students, it turns out, aren't that interested in all these comments that you've made. It's very, very demoralising. So we could be doing exactly the same, making exactly the same mistake in online education. What a terrible waste is that? So we want to avoid it. And to do that, I think it's a good time to think about what feedback really is. And that beyond necessarily the context of education, because certainly we need a loop of feedback in everything that, every thinking process that we do, everything that's organic. I think down the bottom of the slide, I've got the example of riding a bicycle. So you sense that you're going to be tumbling to the left. You have to steer to the left. And so you're constantly jiggling your centre of gravity with the bicycle. That's feedback. So anything that really requires consciousness of what you're doing is a feedback loop. And I guess my theory is that the closer we replicate that, that immediacy, the more likely we are for our feedback to be useful. The French have this lovely term for feedback. It's a new word. I mean, we haven't had feedback since it's a 20th century invention. But information en retour, Rückkopplung, the Germans say. It's a beautiful concept of something coming back to us. When we, for example, draw or anything like that, that's a very, very intense kind of feedback that's occurring. And I think it's proper to all ratiocination. I'm listening to myself as I'm talking. I'm very conscious about the things that I'm saying informing the next things that I'm going to have to say because I've got it wrong or I've left a gap on. And so it's actually very active and a beautiful thing to be doing. So if it's integral to thinking, we can't disappoint it with our online mode of teaching. So it's very important, I think, to distinguish between feedback and assessment. These are not the same thing. Feedback is always in the thick of some activity. And when you pull it out of that, and it's something that you hear much later, that's why the box of essays didn't get collected, because it's kind of no longer that relevant. We've got our mark. We're not going to be doing anything really similar to that essay ever again. We might, out of grace or because we like the lecturer so much, read these comments, but a lot of them will remain unread. And that's quite telling because it's too late. And in addition, I think it's really a different, we're after something quite different, because what defines the gap is not the time that's elapsed between when I did the essay and when I get the feedback. It's the fact that I've done the essay and that I'm not going to do something similar to that again. Unlike when I push the bicycle a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. That's ongoing. This is not ongoing, dead. And it can't really ever be feedback. So we've got a challenge here that we could potentially live up to in the digital environment. We could do that. We could do something as immediate as me balancing this bicycle, or thinking these thoughts that I'm trying to bring together in some semblance of coherence. So what we can do in an online environment is present problems, elicit responses, and invite the student to have an opinion and immediately give feedback. So there's no delay, but also that informs the next thing. So it can be automatic, and I think this is really the great advantage of digital education, and also often the reason it doesn't work, because we look to the multiple choice questionnaire or quiz, MCQ, which I think is always about assessment. And something quite wicked happens there. When we deal with multiple choice questions, multiple choice quizzes, I'm constructing it. I ask you a question. You choose out of the 5 options that I've given you, and I don't really want to tell you if you're right or wrong. The reason I don't want to tell you whether you're right or wrong is that I'm thinking, then you'll know. And this is an assessment. If you know, then what's to stop you from telling someone else who's going to do the test again independently, and that, the cat is out of the bag. I've just blown it. I've told you what the answers are. The whole class can now cheat. So I don't do it. I guard my secret. I keep it all clandestine. This is all the wisdom and so on that the students could be learning from, but no, I say this is assessment, this is multiple choice quiz, and I'm not going to let you have anything. This is really mean. And I think here we lose what could be a teaching resource. So what we've actually come up with in the Office of the Pro-Vice Chancellor Learning and Teaching is an alternative paradigm in which we take elements of that structure, which is the multiple choice quiz, and we turn it into a kind of teaching resource. So we construct it around any question where there's some doubt, and we build, using that standard LMS software, the lesson facility, a kind of argument in which we propose, we ask questions, we propose answers, we then get a response from students, and then we give feedback on that, very liberal. We've got nothing to lose. We're not really going to distinguish between who is an extremely good performer and who is not. Our aim is education. And I think we're at a pass now where we can really use feedback in a way that couldn't have been done in the past. And what's getting in our way is actually the usefulness of assessment in multiple choice quizzes. I can't even say the word, I hate it so much. So what I'd exhort you to do is to take a look at that site, conversationsim.org, and see there's a very comprehensive outline of what a conversation sim is. It's a mode of teaching. And in that, there's a sheet that tells you exactly how to build a conversation sim, and a quite extensive manual that guides you through some of the theory that builds this tool for creating or integrating feedback in teaching. Ciao.